not a one and done. You can't say, well, we sent out a survey and here's what people think, and we're actually not going to do that. Thanks for your ideas. That was great. We appreciate that. But no.
Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Michele and Elizabeth Vidon. Elizabeth, and I've had her as a guest before, and I'm going to call her friend. I'm going to be so bold as to say friend. Elizabeth is coach and founder of RealEyes Coaching out of Reno, Nevada. And it's so funny. I feel like I know you, like we've been in person all this time. We've never been in person.
Which is bizarre because we see each other all the time.
Yes, we've never been in person. We are working on another project, and I'm excited to share that down the road. But today's topic, so here's a trigger. I want to thank David Dye. What was the podcast? It was on leadership stuff about not losing your soul or something. And so anyway, David Dye has a podcast. I stumbled across it and listened to it, sent it to Elizabeth to listen to a section. And so I want to kick us off with this quote from David that he said during the podcast. And there's a story around it that he came with. So anyway, he was visiting some bonsai tree farm, and he asked the guy about how do you grow these, what do you do to get these bonsais to look so beautiful? And the older gentleman, the gardener, horticulturist, whoever he was, basically looked at him and said, "You don't make trees do anything."
Mm-hmm.
And so David's translation of that is the quote that we're going to kick off with. And it is, don't motivate, cultivate. Create the conditions so a growing thing grows. And I love it. I think it's so freaking simple when you talk about leadership, as far as if you step in with this premise as a leader that my role is to create the conditions so growing things can grow, so humans can do what humans do best. I think you're going to end up completely turning leadership on its ear in organizations that are so top down that employees show up at work and people go, our people aren't engaged, they're not loyal, they're not whatever. I think we show up with this intention, right, to create the condition to where growing things can grow. People are going to be engaged. They're going to want to make a difference because their voices are being heard. As Margie Haggerty, my mentor, would say, she said, get their fingerprints on the thinking. And if you do that, you're going to get the fingerprints of the people in your organization on the thinking and the things your organization's doing. Those are my 2 cents. Elizabeth, what's on your mind? Because I know we've chatted a little bit offline before we hit record.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I said yesterday when we talked about this, I loved this part of the podcast, and I love this quote: don't motivate, cultivate, create the conditions so a growing thing grows. And one of the things the other thing that they talked about in this podcast is allowing people to be fully, to embrace their full humanness and to really cultivate that. And you and I have talked before in a previous podcast about sort of the authenticity bit and allowing people to really engage, or sort of engaging with our full selves in any job, in any position. It was in the context of transitions. But, in the context of this, and they talked about this in the podcast, one of the things that I have heard from clients is, not being fully engaged. And we were talking about this in our family the other day in the context of sports, and the way that, coaches try to motivate their players. But all of these different players are motivated maybe by something different. And employers wanting to motivate their employees and making assumptions about what motivates players or what motivates employees. So one of the things that's so great about this quote is that no one, we can't know necessarily what motivates each individual. What motivates you may be different than what motivates me. So there are assumptions about, well, a higher salary is going to motivate this person, or time off is going to motivate that person, or I don't know, whatever. A home run is going to motivate that kid, or whatever the thing is, performance initiatives or whatever. So this is so beautiful because creating the conditions that will allow someone to thrive in their own way and allow them to be fully present and fully human and to engage all the things that are going to allow them to engage.
Mhm.
It's a completely different model. Now, then allowing them to see the output and see what that means for the longer term, to
Mhm.
see how that, to give them, and the other thing they talked about is the autonomy that comes with that,
Mhm.
allowing them to see what that looks like in the end. So some decision-making autonomy is going to
Well, so yeah, I'm sitting here going, uh-huh, yeah, yeah. And I think and I'm also thinking if someone's listening to this, they're going, okay, yeah, that's nice, but
Mhm.
how do you do it? It's like I had a coachee the other day that one of the main goals that he had for our session and our time together is to figure out, and he was director level, so it's not like you're entry level on this thing, but to figure out what do I need to do so I get those opportunities to move up in the organization. So I'll backtrack back into what we're talking about in a minute. And I asked him, I said, so what conversations have you had with your one up?
Yeah.
He just looked at me.
Yeah.
He said, I haven't. So, so the reason I say that and bring that up, it's going to be the same thing with leaders that people come together, whether it's employee engagement surveys that people get back and they go, okay, these are the opportunities that leadership's identified we're going to work on, and this is what we're going to do about it. I said, great. So how do you know what your employees are thinking? Well, there's comments. Okay, there's comments from vocal people. Not everyone's commenting. But it's the same way. So here's the expectation, right? To create the conditions so growing things can grow. And to your point, we're all different humans.
Mhm.
We're going to have some themes, though, I guarantee you. There's going to
Yeah,
be some
absolutely.
themes about what that stuff looks like.
Mhm.
And here's the first step. If you're looking at what are the basic steps that we take to be able to create conditions so growing things can grow, we first need to set the intention for ourselves as a leader or an organization that this is what we're going to do. Instead of what I recently heard is where an organization said, we're gonna give you the time so you can innovate and be creative and do all this stuff. Great. They give people the time to do that. And guess what? They use none
Yeah.
of the
Meanwhile,
implementation ideas that people have. Zippo, right? So you created this condition so people can innovate. Do you think they're growing?
no,
Because literally you're shutting down every single time. And after a while, people are going to come together and there's no innovation happening in that room.
not.
I guarantee you. So one of the first steps is to set the intention for yourself as an organization or a leadership team that we're going to engage with people differently, that we are going to create the condition for growing things to grow. That's the first thing. And understand the impacts of that. So in order for people to grow, what needs to happen? We're now going to be open to doing things differently and learning. So step number 2, let's actually find out from people. What makes them grow? What do they get excited about? What do they enjoy doing? What fills their cup up? All of that kind of stuff. Survey people. Let's get some feedback because we do want to hear from you and we do want to know what it is. Step 2, right? Hear from people. So intention, survey, find out what people really want. Put it into buckets, right? If you will. Step 3, and I freaking don't know if there's really 5 steps, but we'll see, see what happens, right? So after you have the information from people, come back together as a leadership team and say, hey, because you have to balance the needs of the organization with the needs of the people in the organization. You can't, otherwise you tip the ship, right? You go one way or the other, you're going to tip things over. So we have to come back as a leadership team and say, okay, this is what we heard. This is what we want to do. Here's our intention. What are we proposing to be able to move forward and engage? So have an idea, come together and figure out what that looks like. And then guess what you do? Don't top down roll that out. Share with the people that you heard from and say, hey, here's what we heard. Here's what we're proposing based on balancing organizational needs. Oh, by the way, let people know, because in the podcast they also talked about strategy.
Yeah.
And that whatever percentage of people and organizations don't have a clue what the strategy is. None.
That's right. That's right. So they
So
don't know what they're
so
working towards. They have no idea what
Exactly.
they're working towards. Sorry, they can't be
No.
invested in it.
Well, and they don't even acknowledge that what they do is having an impact on the greater good because they don't really
Oh,
realize what
it
that
is.
is.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, one, you're going to set the intention. Two, you're going to survey people. Three, you're going to come together as a leadership team and figure out what that is, balancing the needs of both. Four, go back to the people and say, hey, this is what we heard. Based on balancing this strategy of the organization, this is what we're proposing. What are your thoughts? Get some feedback, tweak it a little bit, right? So now you've got, as Margie Hagney says, you've got the fingerprints of their thinking on the plan. So no longer is it a top-down initiative from leadership because you've rolled it out, you've gotten their feedback on it. So it's not just a one-time thing. Oh, we did a survey and we heard from them, this is what we're doing. Do
Those
a
are the
survey,
ideas.
hear from them, come together with a plan, get their feedback on the plan. And then step 5, there's probably 6 steps in this freaking thing. Step 5 is implement. Do an experiment. Go into a PDSA cycle, right? Plan, do, study, adjust. So you
Mhm.
had your plan. Here's what we're going to do. Do the plan. Roll it out, implement after you do the tweaking. Study it against results. We think it's going to work okay. Get some feedback from people. How's this working? Is it working like you intended? Is it rolling out? Do whatever adjustments. If for some reason you've gotten the silver bullet and you hit it out of the gate, make it standard and say, hey, here's going to be our practice, and we'll see how we do against what our macro level targets are, what our strategies are, right? And check in with people. If for some reason not, do some more adjustments. But I think step 6 is that PDSA cycle. It's that whole thing that you're constantly going to be looking and adjusting, but keeping people engaged in that loop of what the feedback is. So yeah, instead of 5, it's a 6-step process.
Well, and I mean, and I love that. And I think the need for constant feedback and constant adjustment, the revisioning at the end is critical. And you've got to continuously engage your your team. You got to continuously engage your team and
Mhm,
continuously solicit feedback. And you got to keep their fingerprints on it
yes.
all the time. It's like you said, it's not a one and done. You can't say, well, we sent out a survey and here's what people think, and we're actually not going to do that. Thanks for your
Mhm,
ideas. That was great. We appreciate that. But no, because like you say, you can engage people's creativity and they will give you ideas, but
mhm,
use the ideas. You've got to allow decision-making autonomy. So not just, we'll take some of that maybe and sprinkle it around here, but people have
mhm,
to have a sense that they have some ability to make decisions
mhm.
and effect
You know,
change in an
the other thing,
organization. If people don't believe they can affect change in what they're doing,
yep.
then what's the point?
Well, they'll check out.
Yeah,
They'll just check out.
of
And
course,
and then people go around and go, they're not engaged, they don't care, that whatever.
of
And
course
I
not.
hear stuff now with the hybrid world or people working remotely, is that employers are, and this really happens, employees are working for more than one employer. I'm not saying everyone's doing that, but it's happening enough that it became a thing. And I'm just like, oh, that, I mean, talk about disconnect from not only ethics, but the organization and their mission. But when I hear what you're saying about allowing people to make decisions or to implement stuff, I agree with you. And for me, I go back to IO mapping. I think it's iterative objectives. I can't remember but it's basically here's our goal and then what needs to be true, necessary conditions, critical success factors, necessary conditions. So it's like if we're going to be able to give people the autonomy or the flexibility or the ability to make decisions, right, and input into stuff, then they need to be informed about all the other stuff and the constraints. So we need to educate them about the business.
Mhm.
So they need to understand the strategy. They need to understand the why, that you can't go out and go boom, full bore over here because
Mhm.
of this. So when we invest in being transparent around that stuff, because a lot of organizations are really, I'm going to say hesitant, which I'm going to translate to, we would never do this, to share the financial condition of the organization with their employees. Share it. And if you want to be bold and crazy, redistribute bonuses from leadership to all levels of the organization. I remember when I worked at Sutter Health, leadership and above, so people leaders were entitled to yearly bonuses. Guess what? Every person in the organization is doing the work that contributes to that stuff. So I was trying to push for something. It's like, take part of my bonus. Let's redistribute to everyone in the organization so everyone has a share of what's going on. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to have people that are more engaged in what it takes to run this business. But I think that's part of it too. Be transparent, be willing to do things differently, be willing to step in differently. Yes, leadership has more responsibility and more authority. So guess what? They get paid more. And if you distribute bonuses across the whole, you're going to distribute that the right way because the leaders of people are going to get a higher bonus because they get paid more because they have more responsibility. But it's like, I think that's part of it too, is how do we just blow up the limiting beliefs or the blocks that we have about how it has to happen so that we can engage people and do create the condition to where we, what is it? Create the conditions so that growing things grow, and humans are growing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I just had a thought as you
I'm
were.
sorry, I've
No,
talked right through
no,
it.
it's perfect. No, because I was listening, and so I wasn't thinking, which is good. Um, it'll come back. But
I'm
that's
sure it will.
absolutely true. Um, no, it's okay. It must not have been too important because it would have stuck around.
It'll come back. I've had that happen before. I'm
Yeah,
just sitting
no, it's
talking.
good.
It's like, boom, it's gone.
Yeah,
So
it's good.
I love the topic. I appreciate David Dye and the podcast that sparked this whole topic because clearly we have a perspective on it. And
Sure.
the thing too is if you're going to set up time to innovate, and that's one of your pillars or goals or strategies, which there's a lot of organizations,
Yeah.
make sure it's a full cycle. And it's
Yeah,
not
finish it.
just, yes, and it's not just this, oh, we gave you time to do X. But figure out what needs to happen so that you're not like, it's almost like a bait and switch or smoke and mirrors or whatever. I mean,
Mhm.
if it looks and feels like you're just, pacifying something, that may be what it is, but make it real. Because
Yeah,
when you do that, there's not any of your competitors are going to be able to touch you because your organization will blow the doors off. It'll just
100%.
blow the doors off
And
anybody else.
the data are clear on that. I mean,
Yes.
there's no disputing that. And I want to, be clear that, you know, when I say like give people the decision-making autonomy, I'm talking about decision makers.
Yes.
I mean, these are people who are already, I mean, these are leaders who are already in positions to make decisions. And they're not given the autonomy to make decisions. They're just being told, come up with ideas, bring them to me, and then no.
And
Which is
that is going to be
really,
really short-lived I mean, I'm telling you, if I was in that room and I had just 2 rounds of that, I go, yeah, pass. I've got other
yeah,
stuff to
yeah,
do.
it's
I'm
crazy.
not
It's
coming
crazy.
together.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, like you say, then how long is that going to last?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I agree. Um, did you have a thought? You look like you have a thought.
I don't know. I'm still like, wondering about
It's
that.
lingering.
Um,
It's
yeah,
lingering back
yeah,
there. It's
that's like
somewhere,
hanging around back there. But hey, again, yeah,
somewhere.
okay. Yeah, okay.
Um,
Yeah,
I will say, in part of this innovation space, it's you don't have to start across the whole organization.
absolutely.
If you're scared or nervous or whatever about it, you can start with a slice. You can start with your team,
Mhm.
right? Whatever part, because if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not the CEO, or I'm not the executive director, or I'm not but you're something.
Mhm.
So wherever you are in the organization, take a look at what it looks like to implement in your part. Because here's the other thing I'll say is when you try something new, right? Don't try to convince everyone else to do this new thing that you want to do. Just figure out what it is for your slice of the org, your world that you have control over, what it looks like, and then shine a light on the work that your team's doing. because it will get the attention of the rest of the organization. I guarantee you. I've seen it happen time and time again. So I appreciate your time on this topic and listening to podcasts. And again, David Dye with his podcast that sparked us and the energy in us to go, this is it. This is the thing we want to talk about. And the fact that we've heard it from clients. So what are one or two things, Elizabeth, you want people to walk away with around this topic? And it's almost like
Yeah,
autonomy, empowering people and all that space.
it is. It is very much about autonomy. It's about cultivating these environments for, some of it is about, they talked about it in the podcast, but about this cultivating these environments for self-organization, for a for peer-to-peer accountability in these ways, and for broader decision-making autonomy, and really empowering people, because when you do, they're going to set the bar higher, and be more empowered to be accountable to themselves and to each other. And they're really going to establish and step into that ownership of being invested in the company and for these broader initiatives. So
Yes, thank you. You just reminded me too. I was in an event, and then yesterday I had the chance to listen to Keith Ferrazzi again. So Keith Ferrazzi does work with leadership teams, and he coined this term called co-elevation. And so what it means is that you create leadership teams, okay, at every level of the organization. It could be your team. The people, the expectation is, and what we do is we co-elevate each other. And part of that is, being there to support each other, but giving real feedback. So you're able to have that to where your point is we're all leveling up, and we're all doing it as a team, as a unit. And so there's some powerful stuff. I'm excited. He's got a book coming out in November, and I pre-ordered it. And it's so funny because I pre-ordered a hard copy book, which anyone that knows me, when I say I read a book, it's Audible. And so I will actually need to read this book because I'm super excited. This is his playbook that he's been using for over 20 years. So he went together and helped GE turn their company around with this structure that he has. So I'm super excited about it. And it's a lot of the elements that we're talking about now. It's like, I think it's just unhook your people, because you've got them leashed and tethered to these things, and let them do what, just let them bring to work everything that they have. And I think we lose so much on the table with that. So I'm excited about that book too. So anyway, but it reminded me of that term. Yeah. So I'll let you know how it is. I have extra copies, so maybe I'll even give you one. Do you read books, or do you just
I
have?
do read books.
Okay.
I love
So
books.
you're the professor in you still have, well,
Yeah.
I could point to my books too, but I'm not reading them. I'm audibling them.
Yeah. My husband is always like, the top floor of our house is going to collapse. You got to, although
Don't
when we
say
moved
that.
here, I got rid of a lot of them, but, and
Okay.
the name of the podcast is with his guest is Drew Jones. Yes, he's David Dye. The guest of his guest is Drew Jones. And it's called Human-Centered Leadership Through Open Communication in the Workplace.
So anyway, thank you again for this time, Elizabeth. Thank you again for the topic, David Dye and Drew. And until next time, this is Leadership Soundbites with Michele and Elizabeth. And please like, share, subscribe, and have a freaking awesome day. Thank you.
Thanks, Michele.